Welcome to the Conscious Classroom podcast, where we're exploring tools and perspectives that support educators and anyone who works with teams to create more conscious, supportive, and enriching learning environments. I'm your host, Amy Edelstein, and I'll be sharing transformative insights and easy-to-implement classroom supports that are all drawn from mindful awareness and systems thinking. The themes we'll discuss are designed to improve your own joy and fulfillment in your work and increase your impact on the world we share. Let's get on with this next episode. Welcome to part 2 of Technology in Teens, my dialogue with XPrize semifinalist and Inner Strength board member Anthony Holland about the ways that technology is being developed to be able to convey human empathy, care, compassion, about inner strengths work in the classroom, and about the potentials for technology to help students develop an empathetic, caring, and conscious quality of interaction. So have fun. The conversation's far-reaching. What can we do with technology? Like, how far can we go? And what's like, we have the beta versions. What does scale look like in this very personal world of mental well-being and human potential?
Well, I guess one way for me to answer that is that, the potential is almost endless. When I think of the app in its current version, it's an app that you're downloading to your phone from the store, and it's still a client app, right? But now with the cloud and with more social type of features, youth are often disenfranchised in their communities.
Yeah.
And they can feel like they have little voice.
Mm-hmm.
But this can make you feel connected. It can offer a sense of community and care that the world, in some respects, is longing for.
Yeah.
Certainly, in urban communities, it's even more challenging. So it's been exacerbated or highlighted by the pandemic, which in a sense has forced people to have to be at home, but other circumstances already existed, like violence in a community,
Mm-hmm.
that leads to isolation. And this app not only can have the potential to create a new type of community, a mindfulness community, a caring community that didn't exist before. And it can empower the youth. And certainly, technology in and of itself can create good jobs, right? So, just the fact that, if you think of young generations, they're growing up, as you described, with the phone as an extension to everything they do. So they're learning technology at a pace that is mind-boggling. So if they can learn practices empowered by technology that lead to moods of love and care and connectedness, well, imagine the possibilities here to be able to communicate with mentors, and as well as just by default, a way of being that creates job skills that the world's yearning for, while you're empowering yourself with just the skills to be able to navigate the future through new sensibilities. So the possibilities are there, and technology is sort of applied in the right way can create a whole new environment. I think of you, Amy, and the experiences that you've had learning about mindfulness by traveling all over the world. Not every kid in Philadelphia is going to have that opportunity. But the more they can be explored, those sort of pluralistic experiences, the more they're open to possibilities and can begin to consider all kinds of different ways of thinking and not be limited to, being privileged enough to be able to have the opportunity to travel abroad. They can do it right now, and it can stimulate their imagination, hope in the midst of whatever's happening in their backyard.
Right. No, absolutely. I love what you're bringing together, about the use of technology, the jobs that come out of technology. We had 17 beta testers from the high schools, and they were really good. They were incredibly thorough. They need teens are teens. They need a lot of guidance. But you could see that they were being exposed to, I could go into QA, I could go into testing, I could go into coding if I wanted, I could go into user interface. I could, those are big words or big skills, but I'm doing it. I already do this anyway when I'm complaining about an app that I don't like and that it doesn't work. And why don't they have, night mode? And why did they put that button there? That's so stupid. You can't find it. But these are actual jobs. So it opens up a world of possibility, and, and with the kind of online contract market, students in the inner city can work anywhere, and they have access to jobs in a way they didn't used to have access to. And I want to, career development isn't part of what we do, but I see it as a logical extension. You open your mind up to all these opportunities, and then you realize, it's just people doing these things. They weren't special people inherently. They just started doing these things, and I could maybe do them too. And that's not, the schools that I see are almost, not all of them, but most of them are so sadly under-resourced. Only 6% of the schools in Philadelphia have a working library.
Wow.
I read that recently. It's a recent stat. It's from the last month. And the second year I was doing the program, I was in a high school in North Philly, which was a magnet high school, which focused on peace and social justice. And we met in the library. There were no books in the library. There were some empty shelves with a couple of books kind of. And when I grew up, that was my home, when I was, having teen angst and hating the world around me and wanting to be old enough so I could go off somewhere. I went to the library. That's where I went. And that's where I got exposed, where I could just, and the internet isn't the same thing as a working library, and it just was a sign of neglect and lack of opportunity. Lord knows, we could easily source the books for the library. It's, they cut the positions for a librarian. And in the schools that have libraries and reading hours, you feel that sense of openness and creativity. So when you were connecting the app to jobs, to possibility, to other ways of being, I feel like that is an indirect mission of inner strength, because when you're letting go of fixed ways of seeing and you're exploring systems where you're looking at large scale evolutionary development of the brain or cultural change and the levers of culture and how they change our personal experience. When you start looking at the world in that way, you start realizing that there are different possibilities. So that openness of thinking is a big part of what we're trying to teach. And maybe as we expand, we can add more components that either relate to the job world or relate to travel or relate to creating bridges. Because when you grow up in under-resourced communities, you're just not exposed to the options. You don't know they exist.
Yeah. You know what you're provoking in me, and Amy, is that old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And, I think of that means that the entire community of people interact with the children for those children to grow in a safe and healthy environment.
Right.
And technology is sort of like the plumbing that can enable that village again in a new way, in a more expansive way, because there's a lack of resources sometimes, but then there's Google. there's information, and there's a global community that we all need mentors. We all need connection. And if we can create that connection, and I think technology makes that possible, and we can engage care into that conversation, then the possibilities are just endless if we're mindful.
Right. So how do you curate deep conversation in technology? Because technology can facilitate that, but it tends to facilitate very superficial and acrimonious interaction. How do you build in deep because I know you love deep conversation.
Well, when I think about any conversation, there's levels of trust. Mm. And, there's a mood behind that. And, we can have a mood where there's fear and the hiding. We can be polite and conflict avoidance. And that's all really an indication of a low level of trust. But you see that in social media, technology. But then we can move from that mood of fear, if you cultivate it, if we're self-aware, which is sort of what the practices of mindfulness are cultivating, is an awareness of what is this mood that we're in, and is this serving me well? And we can start building trust and moving from avoiding to maybe the next level of trust, which might still not be where we need to be, because we might be in a mood of certainty now, where you're right, I'm wrong, it's win, lose, I attack, you defend. But if I'm aware of that, I can cultivate more trust and move from that debating to openness, exploring, curiosity, shared concerns, discovery. And that happens when you foster the right type of community. And ultimately, partnering and belonging, shared commitments and care. And technology can be applied with that self-awareness. That's where we want to be, at a level of trust, of belonging, of shared care, your cares and my care, win-win friendships, compassion. And that partnering has to get cultivated, though. And I think it starts really with the practices of mindfulness, because you're practicing that self-awareness on yourself of what is the mood that I'm in? And is this mood restrictive? Is it serving me well? And are there practices, just breathing, that could get me to reflect on those assessments that I'm holding, that I'm finding myself in these restrictive moods, to embrace expansive moods with assessments where there's hope and possibilities. And as I begin to practice that myself and then engage in a community of practice of mindfulness, then I can begin to become aware that trust is something that I can be purposeful about cultivating, and aware that, we don't have trust. That's why we're debating. Mm. We don't have trust. You're just being polite. And we can begin to be purposeful about moving towards openness, exploring, and partnering. And so it's not just words, it requires an embodiment. And that's what I think you're teaching and helping us all to learn.
I'm very interested in the intersection of technology with this, because my process was very labor intensive.
Yes.
So, my experience of cultivating those sensitivities came from many 10,000 hours of silent practice, dialogue practice, reflection, creating community. And when I think about being able to do this online, and I'm only just beginning to get exposed to the streaming world and all of its downfalls, but also some potential possibility, is can we, and I think about the teens, because if we could find a way to use technology that would learn also how to keep those norms, obviously it has to do with self-reflection. So technology, you have to inquire and engage with yourself and question your thinking and your responses and be able to look at the interaction. All of that is what helps us deepen and particularly, cultivating the ability to be still and let things be as they are and let go and allow oneself to rest so that one can see clearly, let all the dust settle and then you can see clearly without moving and be able to sit through the storms of emotions in the mind. And that takes practice. But if we're building community, because one of the big things you mentioned earlier was social media bullying. Bullying online it's catastrophic for youth, because how you are when you're a preteen or early teens and somebody says just that one insult and you can never get it out of your mind again. Yes. And, so if we can build online communities in the way you're describing, where the technology also learns to monitor, to question, like, not to control, but to seed inquiry. That would be a big evolution beyond where our app is. Our app is basically the in-person learning, made into audios and text-based stuff with photos and activities and leaderboards and games. But it really is not that much different than our traditional teaching. But if we could, so if a conversation is stuck or a stream is stuck, then the app learns how to seed questions into it that provoke deeper, more compassionate self-inquiry, group inquiry, helps people back off. That would be really outrageous. I mean, that would be phenomenal if we could figure out how to do that. Do you think that's possible?
It's more than possible. But a journey of 1,000 steps begins with one small step. And I think you've made the first step because there is an app. And now you can begin to take baby steps along that journey. And if I go back to the XPrize and I use that as sort of, as Stephen Covey used to say, begin with the end in mind, that the possibilities are there, well, then I can begin to work one step at a time down that path. But the path is one where we can begin to have role models. You can have avatars or people in that community that are learning.
Mm-hmm.
So all the pieces exist, like artificial intelligence. It's already there, and you've played with that in your car, right? Your car's like, there's a better path available, or you use technology today when you go to Amazon and the system's like, I see you're buying this. Well, those same learning processes can be applied to help you to learn and facilitate learning behaviors that serve you well. And I think a missing conversation in education sometimes can be our Cartesian way of thinking about education.
Absolutely.
And we forget play is huge. But if I can make this fun and we could play and learn how to be a community, how to learn how to work effectively as teams, and how to deal with unexpected things, contingencies that may emerge in positive ways, so that I'm navigating uncertainty with wisdom, with serenity. But I'm embracing that there's things that may happen, and the system can facilitate that and learn with me. And that's all there already. It's just adding those little pieces, walking down that path, and you're already on the journey. But if the XPrize shows you anything, it's not a movie anymore.
This is really exciting. I actually hadn't thought about this before, but this is really exciting. Because just building an app that kind of does what other apps do, it's good. We need to do this, and the students need to benefit from it, and we need to get it everywhere, because there are too many mental health issues that just need a little addressing. I don't want to leave those teens alone at night with nothing to do but play violent video games, or when they're alone and confused. But the idea of creating a more intelligent community through the technology where the values of depth, awareness, profound sensitivity, self-inquiry, questioning fixed ideas, supporting each other's higher potentials, being able to intuit when somebody is about to break through and help them grow rather than shut them down. All of those things that come, when you're in group inquiry, that's very that with a group of people who are very sensitive, extraordinary things can happen. I mean, you can facilitate somebody's transformation in just really profound ways by asking a question at the right moment or staying silent at the right moment. And those breakthroughs become collective knowing. So you start becoming sensitive to the noosphere, sensitive to the container of consciousness, to that wisdom that wants to emerge. And when you're looking at teens who are looking for their self-identity in a world that looks very hostile, because the Middle Ages weren't any great shakes either. I mean, it was rough times then, but we're being presented with a lot of images of hostility. If you just turn on the news, it's so unpleasant. You're not really getting news. You're just getting unpleasantness. You could be learning in a different way. So if we can, it's hard for teens, but if we can create a community that is really about fostering, our wisdom and, unlimited potential for growth and care, and use technology to seed the questions to help, move to the side, move out of the way, the aggression, the mistrust, the bullying, the harshness, just the ways that people have been socialized. If we can, that would be really quite a breakthrough, because teens are wired to connect. The teen brain is wired to bond with their peers. It's an evolutionary necessity. When our early, human, evolution, our parents' generation was going to die out when we were teenagers. They weren't going to live that much longer. We needed our social peer group to survive. So they're wired to do that. Technology can connect. And then if we could start envisioning a learning community around these values that arise with systems thinking and meditation, and then you feel like, oh, we could be doing something really powerful.
Amy, that's why I'm excited about being a part of this inner strength community. And if there's one thing I learned from this XPrize avatar contest was that what Peter Diamandis' vision was not for a bunch of teams to get together to compete so that one could emerge as a winner. He's creating a community. And the whole time we were down there, the 30 teams were there from around the world, and they were encouraging us to partner up with each other, get together with each other, learn from this team in Germany and this team in Russia and this team in Japan, and stay a community, because it's the best ideas all coming together that are going to bring this future, not a winner. So if I apply that to creating a learning community right here in Philadelphia, it's the greatest minds all over the world are thinking about pieces of this. I'm currently in this learning process of how to work effectively as a team with a shared friend of ours, Fernando Flores, who's a mentor of mine. Well, we're learning how to work as teams by immersing ourselves in World of Warcraft. Now I don't know anything about that game. There's probably some teens in the high school that could teach me a little bit about how to navigate that. But the fact that I don't know how to play the game is part of the learning process, because I'm dependent on other people in the game that I'm just meeting for the first time somewhere in the other part of the world, but maybe that person's a little more game aware. And so they're helping me to learn, but we're all going on these quests and we don't know what to expect. So we're learning how to trust each other, how to leverage each other's strengths, how to come together as a team. And of course, if we don't have these conversations, bad things happen during the game. But my body doesn't know that this is a game.
Right.
And we're learning how to have effective conversations. We're learning how to work as a team. We're learning how to conquer challenges that as an individual we could never do, but we're better together. And all of this is because we're playing a game, but it's a serious conversation about how do we really work in the real world to be
Right.
effective. Well, that applies right here with the Inner Strength community. We can build on what it is that you've begun and invite like-minded people from all over the world to be a part of this thinking, whether that's SAP, Google, or other people who are practicing other forms of learning, a Buddhist community that may have values that are not just how do I win, values that we can learn from. And all of that gets simulated in the game. It's exciting.
Thank you for listening to The Conscious Classroom. I'm your host, Amy Edelstein. Please check out the show notes on innerstrengthfoundation.net for links and more information. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend and pass the love on. See you next time.